Dr. Maya, Chen woke to the sound of water. Not the mechanical hum of recyclers that had lulled her to sleep for how long, but actual flowing water. Her eyes remained closed as she cataloged sensations. Soft breeze on her face, earthy smells, a cushioned surface beneath her that was decidedly not the rigid polymer of her stasis pod. Her eyes snapped open that a canopy of iridescent leaves shimmered overhead, refracting sunlight into prismatic patterns across what appeared to be a living structure woven from luminescent fibers. The pod she'd entered 70 years ago was nowhere to be seen. Instead, she lay on a bed of moss-like vegetation that pulsed gently beneath her weight. "Containment breach," she whispered, voice hoarse from disuse. "Emergency protocol." Her words died as a flower the size of her palm unfurled beside her head, releasing a cloud of glittering spores that coalesced into a hovering display of text. "Welcome, last guardian. Adaptation complete. Status, viable." Maya bolted upright, heart hammering against her ribs. The sudden movement sent a wave of nausea through her vestibular system, struggling to recalibrate after decades of suspended animation. She clutched at what should have been the emergency beacon implanted beneath her collarbone, a failsafe meant to activate in the event of premature revival. Her fingers found smooth skin. No implant. No scars from the 3 surgeries she'd undergone before entering stasis. Even the burn mark on her forearm from a lab accident 15 years ago had vanished. "What the hell?" she murmured, examining hands that looked stronger, younger than she remembered. Her last memory was of the countdown, Earth's final attempt to preserve human genetic material through the coming extinction event. She had been 43 then, the last remaining scientist at the Svalbard Global Seed Vault, tasked with overseeing the biological archive long after everyone else had either fled to the failing orbital colonies or perished in the cascading ecological collapse. The floating text dissolved and reformed. "Your questions are anticipated. Please proceed to the Nexus for orientation." The living walls of her enclosure parted, revealing a path lined with bioluminescent fungi leading into a landscape that defied comprehension. Maya staggered to her feet, noting that she wore a simple garment that seemed to be composed of the same fibrous material as her surroundings, a fabric that adjusted to her movements with fluid precision. The path before her wound through what had once been the Arctic tundra of Svalbard, now transformed into a riot of impossible vegetation. Trees with crystalline trunks stretched skyward, their branches hosting colonies of small creatures that glided between them on membranes of translucent tissue. The horizon was dominated by structures that blurred the line between architecture and organism. Vast spirals that pulsed with internal light, domes that seemed to breathe, spires that rotated slowly to track the sun's movement. "This is impossible," Maya whispered. The permafrost that had preserved the seed vault should have taken centuries to thaw, even with accelerated climate change. And nothing could explain the alien geometries that now defined the landscape. A small creature scurried across her path, vaguely reminiscent of a mouse, but with too many legs and skin that shifted color as it moved. It paused, regarding her with multifaceted eyes before continuing on its way. Maya followed the luminous trail, scientific training kicking in despite her shock. She cataloged observations with clinical precision. Ambient temperature approximately 24 degrees Celsius. Oxygen levels seemingly standard for human respiration judging by her unlabored breathing. Gravity consistent with Earth norms. The sun overhead appeared normal, though surrounded by atmospheric phenomena she couldn't identify. Prismatic bands that arced across the sky like permanent auroras. The path opened onto a clearing dominated by a structure that could only be the Nexus referenced in the message. It resembled an enormous lotus blossom, its petals fully open to reveal a central platform surrounded by what appeared to be control interfaces. Though like everything else, they seemed grown rather than manufactured. As she approached, portions of the platform illuminated in response to her footsteps. At the center, a column of light coalesced into a vaguely humanoid form constructed of intricate geometric patterns in constant motion. Dr. Maya Chen, it said, its voice neither male nor female, with harmonics that seemed to bypass her ears entirely. Last guardian of Earth's biological heritage. Welcome to your inheritance. Maya stopped at the edge of the platform, scientific skepticism warring with raw awe. Where are you? What happened to Earth? Where are the other stasis pods? The entity's form rippled, patterns rearranging. I am a custodian, an interface between you and what Earth has become. The transformation you witness is the result of Project Lazarus, your project, Dr. Chen, though the outcome differed significantly from your team's projections. That's impossible, Maya said flatly. Project Lazarus was theoretical, a last-ditch effort to engineer extremophile organisms that could jumpstart ecological recovery after the collapse. We never got past preliminary gene sequencing before the funding was pulled. Your genetic blueprints were recovered from the Vault archives, the custodian replied. Combined with the biological samples you preserved, they formed the foundation for what came after. But the process was augmented. Augmented? By whom? The custodian's form expanded, surrounding Maya with a three-dimensional display of the planet. It showed Earth's familiar continents, but overlaid with networks of the same biological architecture she'd already witnessed, an interconnected web spanning the entire globe. They call themselves the Seeded, the custodian said, though that is an imperfect translation. They encountered Earth approximately 30 years after you entered stasis. By then, the surface had become largely uninhabitable for carbon-based life, as you understood it. The orbital colonies had failed. Humanity, with few exceptions, had perished. Maya felt her knees weaken. Despite knowing the projections, despite having volunteered for the Vault precisely because she understood what was coming, the finality of it struck her like a physical blow. The Vault? She managed. The other stasis pods? The seed vault remained sealed and functional, as designed. You were the only human in stasis there. The others, the preservation efforts on other continents, those facilities failed within the first decade after the collapse. Maya sank to her knees, the enormity of it washing over her. I'm the last one. The last human. The last unmodified human, yes, the custodian acknowledged. Though your genetic material has been preserved and incorporated into the seeding process. In a sense, humanity continues, though transformed beyond what you would recognize. These seeded, they're aliens? They came to Earth. The geometric form shifted again, displaying what appeared to be a journey through space, but unlike any spacecraft Maya could comprehend. The vessel, if it could be called that, resembled an enormous seed, propelled through the void by energies that distorted space itself around it. They are travelers, the custodian explained, moving from world to world, seeking dying biospheres. They do not conquer or terraform in the way your science fiction envisioned. They integrate. They bring their biological knowledge, merge it with what they find, and create new synthesis, new possibility. What? Maya demanded. What do they gain? Diversity, knowledge, continuation. The custodian's form contracted, becoming more densely patterned. Their own world died long ago. They exist now only as a traveling biological archive, not unlike what you attempted with the Vault, but on a scale your civilization never achieved. Maya stood on shaking legs, anger cutting through her shock. And they just, decided to transform our planet? Use our genetic heritage without consent? Where are they now? Everywhere, the custodian said simply. The seeded are not individuals as you understand the concept. They exist as a distributed intelligence within the planetary biome they help create. Every structure you see, every new organism, all contain aspects of their consciousness, merged with genetic expressions drawn from Earth's original life. Maya turned in a slow circle, seeing the alien landscape with new understanding. Not an invasion, a fusion. The mathematical precision of the structures, the impossible biology of the creatures, all of it an integration of Earth's genetic legacy with something utterly foreign. And what am I? She finally asked. Why am I here? Why was I revived? You are the inheritor, the custodian said. The seeded discovered your stasis pod and recognized its purpose. They understood that you had sacrificed your future to preserve Earth's past. They honored that choice by preserving you, healing your cellular damage, removing your genetic predispositions for disease, and preparing you for awakening. Preparing me how? Maya examined her hands again, suddenly suspicious of her own body. Minimal adaptations to allow you to survive in the new biosphere. Enhanced cellular repair. Improved neural connectivity to interface with the planetary systems. Nothing that alters your fundamental humanity. Maya laughed bitterly. Nothing except making me the last of my kind on a planet I no longer recognize. The custodian's form pulsed. The seated anticipated your distress. They offer a choice. You may return to stasis, if you wish, permanent this time. Or you may take your place as the inheritor, the living link between what Earth was and what it has become. What exactly does being this inheritor entail? You would have access to the entire biological archive, both Earth's original genetic heritage and the seeded's contributed knowledge. You would help guide the continued evolution of this world. The seeded value the perspective you bring, the human understanding of Earth's original biosphere. Maya stepped off the platform, needing space to think. The enormity of the choice threatened to overwhelm her. She had entered stasis expecting to die there. The vault had never been designed as a true ark, merely a desperate attempt to preserve some fragment of Earth's biological diversity for whatever might come after. She had volunteered knowing she was sacrificing her future, and now, improbably, she had won again, though nothing like what she could have imagined. I need time, she said finally. I need to see more of what Earth has become before I can decide. Of course, the custodian agreed. The Nexus will remain accessible to you. I will guide you as you explore. Maya turned back to the path that had brought her here, then hesitated. How long has it been since I entered stasis? The custodian's form dimmed slightly. 273 years by your calendar. Maya nodded, a strange calm settling over her. Everyone she had known, everyone she had loved, would have been long dead even without the collapse. The world she had known was gone regardless. Perhaps that made this easier, in a way. Show me, she said quietly. Show me what Earth has become. The days that followed were a blur of discovery and disorientation. The custodian guided Maya through landscapes that bore only passing resemblance to the Earth she had known. The Arctic had become a temperate zone of extraordinary biodiversity, featuring species that combined familiar evolutionary templates with utterly alien adaptations. She learned that the seeded had established their integration across the entire planet, transforming even the deep oceans and the highest mountain ranges. The process had accelerated natural healing of the damage caused by humanity. The atmosphere had been rebalanced, the oceans deacidified, the soil renewed. But this was not mere restoration. It was radical reimagining. These were sequoias, Maya murmured, standing at the base of a towering crystal bark tree that pulsed with internal luminescence. Its branches stretched nearly a kilometer into the sky, hosting entire ecosystems within its structure. Correct, the custodian confirmed, its presence now a small floating constellation of light beside her. Their genetic material was preserved in your archive. The seeded enhanced their growth patterns and integrated photosynthetic capabilities beyond the original template. Maya placed a hand against the living crystal of the trunk, feeling a subtle vibration, almost like a heartbeat. And they're conscious? You said the seeded consciousness was distributed throughout the biosphere. Not individually conscious as you would understand it, the custodian explained, but connected to the greater network. Information flows through all living systems here, a planetary nervous system, you might say. Each new discovery brought Maya's scientific mind more fully online, temporarily overshadowing her existential crisis. She cataloged, questioned, and analyzed with increasing enthusiasm. The Seeded's biological innovations were centuries beyond what human science had achieved. Cellular structures that could transmit information like computer networks, metabolic processes that approached perfect efficiency, symbiotic relationships that allowed for collective problem solving among species. This is how they navigate space, she realized on the fifth day, examining microscopic structures within a leaf-like organism. They don't build ships, they grow them. And these structures, they're for manipulating quantum fields, aren't they? Your comprehension is impressive, the custodian acknowledged. Yes, the Seeded travel between worlds by growing vessels that can access quantum dimensions. It is how they arrived here, and how they continue their journey. Continue. Maya looked up sharply. They're still leaving Earth. Small delegations depart periodically, seeking other worlds in need of integration. The majority of the Seeded consciousness remains here, embedded in Earth's new biosphere. As fascinating as the biological innovations were, it was the evidence of intentional preservation that moved Maya most deeply. In a valley that had once been part of Central Europe, the Seeded had recreated an approximation of Earth's original forest ecosystem, modified to survive in the new climate, but recognizably derived from oaks, maples, and pines. Animals that resembled deer, wolves, and bears moved through the understory, though close inspection revealed subtle adaptations. They did this for me, Maya asked, watching a creature that was almost a fox stalk through the underbrush. For what you represent, the custodian corrected. The Seeded value biological and cultural heritage. When they understood the purpose of your vault, they recognized a kindred purpose. Much of Earth's original ecosystem has been preserved in genetic libraries, though most exists now in adapted forms. On the seventh day, the custodian brought Maya to what had once been northern India. There, in a clearing surrounded by hybrid ecosystem, stood structures that were unmistakably human in origin, or at least inspired by human architecture. Domes, spires, and arches formed a small city, though the materials were the same biosynthetic compounds that dominated the new Earth. What is this place? Maya asked. A community, the custodian answered, of those who carry your genetic heritage. Before Maya could process this statement, figures emerged from the structures, humanoid in basic form, but like everything else in this new world, transformed. Their skin contained the same bioluminescent patterns she'd observed in plant life. Their movements had an unsettling fluidity, and their features, while recognizably hominin, were subtly altered. Eyes slightly larger, limbs proportioned differently. You said I was the last unmodified human, Maya whispered, unable to look away. That is correct. These individuals are descendants of human genetic material, extensively integrated with Seeded biology. They are a new species, one of several human-derived lineages that have emerged. One of the figures approached, moving within human grace. She, Maya decided, noting basic morphological features, stopped several meters away and made a gesture of greeting with two long fingers. We honor the inheritor, the woman said, her voice containing the same harmonic overtones as the custodian's. I am Sesh, seventh generation after seeding. Maya struggled to find her voice. You're human. I am of human descent, Sesh corrected gently. My ancestors' genetic material was preserved in what you called the Mumbai repository. The Seeded recovered it after integration began. There were survivors. Hope flared briefly in Maya's chest. Other stasis pods. No living humans survived the collapse and integration. The custodian interjected. Only preserved genetic material. The Seeded used this material to create new life forms that carried human heritage. Sesh people are approximately 60% human by genetic structure. Maya felt her hope crumble as quickly as it had formed. Not survivors, then just echoes. Genetic ghosts. Sesh seemed to sense her disappointment. We carry human memory, she offered. Not individual experiences, but cultural knowledge. The seeded were able to preserve information structures from your digital archives before they degraded completely. We know of Earth's history, of human achievement and failure. And what do you think of your ancestors? Maya asked, curious despite her unease. Sesh's expression shifted in a way Maya couldn't quite interpret. We honor the creativity and resilience of humanity. We learn from your mistakes. We carry forward what was valuable. She paused. We are not human, inheritor, but neither are we separate from human legacy. Maya spent 3 days with Sesh community, learning about the hybrid culture they had developed. They maintained libraries of human knowledge, practiced art forms that had evolved from human traditions, and conducted scientific research that built upon human foundations, all while integrated into the seeded biological network that spanned the planet. There were other communities scattered across the globe, Sesh explained, some more human-like than others, each representing different approaches to incorporating human genetic and cultural heritage into the new planetary system. None were human as Maya would define it, but all carried some fragment of humanity forward. On the 10th night after her awakening, Maya sat alone on a ridge overlooking what had once been the Himalayan foothills. The landscape below sparkled with bioluminescence as nocturnal organisms went about their business. Above, stars shone in unfamiliar patterns. The heavens themselves had changed in the centuries she'd slept. Have you reached a decision? The custodian asked, manifesting beside her. Maya didn't answer immediately. She had spent days vacillating between wonder at the new Earth and grief for what had been lost. The scientific marvel of what the seeded had accomplished was undeniable. They had saved a dying planet, created new forms of life that were sustainable and beautiful. But they had done so by fundamentally transforming what Earth had been, by turning humanity into just another genetic contributor to their grand biological synthesis. If I become this inheritor, she said finally, what power would I actually have? Would I be able to change anything? Or am I just meant to rubber stamp what the seeded have already decided? The custodian's form shifted thoughtfully. You would have significant influence over future integration decisions. The seeded value your perspective precisely because it differs from their own. You represent a viewpoint they cannot replicate, a living connection to pre-integration Earth. But I couldn't undo what's been done, Maya pressed. I couldn't restore Earth to what it was. No, the custodian acknowledged. The changes are too fundamental. Earth's original biosphere could not be reconstructed now, and attempting to do so would cause the extinction of countless new species that have emerged since integration. Maya nodded, having expected this answer. Tell me about the stasis option. You would be placed in permanent suspension. No consciousness, no dreams. A peaceful end. And what happens to all the genetic material I preserved? To the knowledge I safeguarded. It remains part of the integrated system, as it already is. Your personal genetic material would be preserved in the archive, but not activated, honored, but not replicated. Maya stood, stretching muscles that felt simultaneously younger and different than she remembered. I've spent my entire adult life trying to preserve Earth's biodiversity, she said quietly. I accepted a one-way trip into stasis because I believed that legacy was worth preserving even if humanity itself didn't survive. She gestured at the alien landscape below. This isn't what I imagined, not even close. But life continues here. Earth continues, not as it was, but evolving, adapting. She turned to face the custodian. Isn't that what I was trying to protect in the first place? Not stasis, but the potential for life to continue. The custodian's light patterns intensified. The seeded believed you would understand. It is why they preserved you, specifically. What would my lifespan be if I accepted the role of inheritor. Indefinite, with ongoing cellular regeneration. The seeded do not experience death, as you understand it. When physical bodies reach the end of their viability, consciousness transfers to the network and eventually to new physical vessels. Maya considered this functional immortality, or at least a lifespan far beyond human norms. Time enough to truly understand this new Earth, to influence its ongoing evolution, to ensure that some essence of humanity's better nature survived in whatever came next. I'll do it, she said finally. I'll become your inheritor, but on one condition. State your terms. I want to establish a true human preserve. Not just genetic archives, not just memory libraries, an actual, functioning ecosystem as close to Earth's original state as possible. A place where the original templates can exist alongside all this. She gestured at the hybrid landscape. Integration. The custodian was silent for long moments. This would require significant resources, and there are biological compatibility challenges with the current atmospheric composition. You said I'd have influence, Maya countered. This is what I want to do with it. Create a living museum of what Earth was. Not to replace what it's become, but to preserve the memory in more than just databanks. More silence. And Maya realized the custodian was likely communicating with the distributed consciousness of the seeded across the planet. It is agreed, the custodian finally said. A preserve will be established. The location of your vault will serve as its center, expanding outward as viable organisms are reconstructed from genetic templates. Maya felt a weight lift from her shoulders. Not the grief of all she'd lost, which would likely never fully disappear, but the burden of indecision. She had a purpose again, a way to honor what had been while engaging with what now was. When do we begin? She asked. The process of fully integrating you as inheritor requires preparation, the custodian explained. You will need enhanced neural structures to interface with the planetary network. This can be achieved gradually, maintaining your essential human perspective while enabling deeper communication with integrated systems. In my Preserve project, initial planning can commence immediately. Full implementation will require your completed integration. The knowledge structures you will access are necessary for successful reconstruction of original Earth ecosystems. Maya nodded, suddenly exhausted but more at peace than she'd felt since awakening. All right, she said quietly. Let's get started. 1 year later, Maya stood at the edge of a newly established lake in what had once been the Svalbard archipelago. The water was clean and clear, remarkable in itself after the polluted state of Earth's waterways before the collapse. Fish genetically reconstructed from her archive darted beneath the surface, their scales catching the light of a setting sun. Along the shore, plants that would have been recognized by pre-collapse botanists had taken root. Grasses, sedges, and small flowering species whose genetic material had been preserved in the vault. They were the advance guard of what would become her living museum, a reconstruction of Earth's biological history. The avian reconstructions are ready for release, said a voice behind her. Maya turned to see Sesh approaching, carrying a container that hummed with life. The first birds to fly over this region in centuries. Over the past year, Sesh had become Maya's closest collaborator, though not human as Maya defined it. Sesh's curiosity about her genetic heritage made her an eager student of Earth's original ecosystems. Together, they had overseen the genetic reconstruction of dozens of species from the vault archives, carefully adapted to survive in the current atmospheric conditions while maintaining as much of their original characteristics as possible. Let's see them, Maya said, her enhanced vision easily detecting the fluttering movements within the container. Sesh opened the top, and half a dozen small birds took flight. Sparrows, their genetic profile carefully reconstructed from preserved samples. They circled once, twice, and then dispersed toward a stand of trees that had been grown specifically to provide them habitat. Successful behavioral patterning, Sesh observed. The neural templates extracted from the archive appear to have integrated correctly. Maya nodded, still marveling at the technology the seeded had shared with her. Not only could they reconstruct organisms from preserved genetic material, but they could also extract and implement behavioral patterns from the digital records she had helped maintain before the collapse. The birds knew how to be birds because those instincts had been encoded alongside their physical characteristics. The mammalian reconstructions are progressing well, Sesh continued. Small rodents first, as we discussed. The habitat needs further development before we can support larger species. And human genetic reconstructions? Maya asked, voicing the question that had preoccupied her most intensely. Sesh's expression shifted in the subtle way Maya had learned to recognize as discomfort. The technical challenges remain significant. Full human reconstruction without seeded integration has never been attempted. But it's theoretically possible, Maya pressed. We've discussed this. I don't expect a full human population, just a small, viable community. A living record, just like the rest of the preserve. The seeded consensus remains divided on this aspect of your proposal, Sesh admitted. There are concerns about evolutionary divergence, resource allocation, and historical patterns. Maya understood the unspoken concern. Humanity had nearly destroyed Earth once before. The seeded, for all their apparent benevolence, were hesitant to risk recreating a species with such a troubled history. Their integration with human genetic material had been selective, incorporating creativity and adaptability while deliberately excluding certain behavioral tendencies. We'll continue the discussion, Maya said, unwilling to abandon the most controversial aspect of her preserve. For now, let's focus on the ecosystems we've already begun establishing. They walked the perimeter of the lake, Maya pointing out adjustments she wanted to make. More diverse plant communities along the western shore, deeper waters to support larger fish species, soil composition modifications to better replicate pre-collapse conditions. Her neural enhancements allowed her to communicate these specifications directly to the planetary network, which would implement them gradually over the coming weeks. The integration process had changed Maya in ways she was still discovering. Her consciousness remained fundamentally human, but it had been expanded. She could perceive the flows of energy and information through the planetary biosphere, could communicate directly with the distributed intelligence of the seeded when necessary, could access vast repositories of biological knowledge with a thought, but she remained separate, distinct. The seeded had honored her request to maintain her essential humanity even as they enhanced her capabilities. She was a bridge between worlds, the last true human and the first inheritor as the sun dipped below the horizon. Maya and Sesh returned to the complex of structures that had been grown near the site of the original vault. The architecture blended human aesthetic preferences with seeded biological efficiency. A physical manifestation of the hybrid future Maya was helping to shape. There's a communication request for you, Sesh said as they entered the central chamber. From the delegation. Maya nodded, having expected this. Put them through. The air in the center of the room shimmered, coalescing into a representation of the seated delegation. Those aspects of their distributed consciousness currently traveling between stars. The image was abstract, a swirling complexity of patterns similar to the custodian's form, but vastly more elaborate. Inheritor, the delegation greeted her, their composite voice resonating on multiple frequencies. We have encountered another world in need. We seek your input. This was the other aspect of Maya's role as inheritor, advising the seeded on their continued mission of biological preservation and integration. Her human perspective provided a counterbalance to their collective viewpoint, especially when ethical questions arose. Show me, she requested. The air filled with images of a planet orbiting a distant star. One Maya recognized from her pre-collapse astronomical knowledge as a system approximately 40 light-years from Earth. The world appeared rocky and marginally habitable, with thin atmosphere and sparse vegetation, clinging to sheltered valleys. Indigenous life? She asked. Microbial and simple multicellular organisms, the delegation responded. No sapient species. The star is entering an expansion phase that will render the planet uninhabitable within their equivalent of 300 Earth years. Maya studied the information with both her human intuition and her enhanced cognitive capabilities. You're considering integration? Yes. The biological templates are potentially valuable, despite their simplicity. The world could be stabilized against the stellar changes with sufficient intervention. Maya considered the implications. The Seeded's mission of preserving and integrating biological diversity across worlds was, in many ways, an extension of what she had tried to accomplish with the Vault. Conservation on a cosmic scale. Yet she remained ambivalent about the transformation of entire biospheres, even when done with apparent benevolence. What level of integration are you proposing? She asked. Full planetary restructuring, as you did with Earth? Or more limited intervention? The simplicity of existing life forms would make full integration most efficient, the delegation answered. Maya was quiet for a moment, weighing the competing values. The preservation of unique biological templates, even simple ones, against the wholesale transformation of an entire world's evolutionary trajectory. Establish preservation zones first, she finally said. Areas where the original life forms can continue their natural evolution, protected from the stellar changes. Then integrate around those zones. Create a patchwork rather than a total conversion. The delegation's pattern shifted in what Maya had come to recognize as consideration. This approach is less efficient. Resources would be divided, but more respectful of what's already there, Maya countered. Even simple life deserves the chance to follow its own evolutionary path, where possible. That's the lesson of Earth. Integration that honors what came before, not just overwrites it. After what seemed like an internal conference among the distributed consciousness, the delegation's pattern settled. Your perspective is valued. Inheritor. We will implement a preservation zone approach as suggested. As the delegation's presence faded, Maya felt a familiar mixture of satisfaction and wistfulness. Her influence was real. She was helping shape the Seeded's approach, tempering their efficiency with her human values of conservation and respect for evolutionary autonomy. Yet the power dynamic remained fundamentally unbalanced. She advised, they decided. You're troubled, Sesh observed, her enhanced perception easily reading Maya's physiological cues. Just contemplating my place in all this, Maya admitted. I'm neither fully of the old world nor fully of the new. Sometimes I wonder if I made the right choice, becoming the inheritor instead of opting for final stasis. Sesh moved closer, her inhuman grace still sometimes startling to Maya even after a year of close collaboration. Without you, the preserve would not exist. Many species would remain only as data, never again to exist as living beings. And the Seeded's approach to other worlds would not benefit from human ethical frameworks. I know, Maya sighed. And those matters. It has to matter. She gestured toward the window, where the reconstruction of an Earth ecosystem continued to take shape. But sometimes I miss just being human, being part of a community of my own kind, not being the last of anything. Sesh was quiet for a moment, her inner luminescence shifting in patterns that Maya had learned to associate with deep thought. The Seeded have reached a new consensus regarding your human reconstruction proposal, she finally said, that Maya's attention sharpened immediately. What consensus? Limited viability testing has been approved. A small number of human genetic profiles may be reconstructed, no more than 20 individuals initially, with careful monitoring to assess integration potential. Joy and disbelief warred within Maya. After months of debate and resistance, this concession was more than she had dared hope for. Unmodified humans, true genetic reconstructions, with minimal adaptations necessary for survival in current atmospheric conditions, Sesh clarified. but yes, essentially unmodified humans. Your direct legacy. When Maya could barely contain her excitement. How soon can we begin? Preparation of viable genetic profiles will require approximately 6 months. Growth acceleration protocols can reduce physical development to approximately 3 years from initiation to adult form. Neural templating from archived human consciousness patterns will be implemented during development. They won't just be physical copies, Maya realized. They'll have personalities, knowledge, memories derived from the archives. Not specific individual memories, Sesh cautioned, but generalized human knowledge structures, yes. They will awaken as fully formed adults with functional knowledge of language, culture, and basic skills. Maya tried to temper her hopes. These reconstructed humans wouldn't be the same as naturally born and raised individuals. They would be something new, despite their genetic authenticity. But they would be human in a way that nothing else on Earth now was. She would no longer be alone. "Thank you," she said, knowing that Sesh must have advocated for this decision within the seated consensus. "This means everything." Sesh's expression shifted into what Maya had come to recognize as her version of smile. The seated understand preservation, inheritor. They preserved you so that humanity's perspective would continue. It is consistent that they would extend this preservation further under your guidance. Maya turned back to the window, watching as birds, the first birds on Earth in centuries, settled into their new habitat for the night. Beyond them, the hybrid ecosystem of the transformed Earth stretched to the horizon, beautiful and alien, and somehow now also home. She was the bridge between worlds, the last human of the old Earth and the first inheritor of the new. And soon, if all went well, she would help bring humanity back into the cosmos, not as the dominant species they had once imagined themselves to be, but as one voice among many in the biological symphony the seeded were creating across the stars. It wasn't the future she had expected when she entered that stasis pod centuries ago. But as she watched a world reborn through the fusion of human legacy and alien vision, Maya found herself looking forward with hope for the first time since awakening. The last human would not remain alone for long.